You're listening to Crosstalk, Conversations with Kurtis. Crosstalk, Conversations with Kurtis is brought to you by...
You know, there are few relationships more solid than the bond between a man and his barber. For years, I've gotten my cut with Gene the Barber. Gene has been cutting my hair for more than 20 years. Call him directly at 240-687-7253 and make an appointment. Gene the Barber, 240-687-7253.
A Squared Home and Office Solutions is the go-to source for home or office network and audiovisual solutions. We can help with smart home integration, wireless networking, media rooms, security systems, and more. We will link technology to your lifestyle seamlessly. Visit homeandofficesolutions.com for more info.
You're listening to Crosstalk, Conversations with Kurtis. Here's your host, Kurtis Cross.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Crosstalk Conversations with Kurtis. My name is Kurtis Cross. I am your host. I want to thank you for listening. I want you to join us on Instagram and Twitter at Kurtis Talks. That's Kurtis with a K. And I want you to listen on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and wherever podcasts are found. I want to thank you for listening and watching. We're super excited to bring this weekly podcast to you. If you're listening, I hope you have a good time listening. If you're watching, here we are. I'd like to welcome today's guest. Jason Hecker is a dear friend of mine who I've known for more than 30 years. We met in high school and sort of never let that go. He's a fellow Montgomery Blair Blazer High School alumni. He's an NYU graduate, a creative mind, a brilliant talent. Last but not least, he has a remarkable family. We'll talk about them, but that includes Alyssa, Ian, and of course, two people who are very dear to me, Ivy and Larry Hecker, his parents. Jason, please introduce yourself to these wonderful, fine folks in podcast land.
Hey, gang. Kurtis, I am thrilled to be here in the podcast studio with you. I am very excited to talk to you, and I couldn't introduce myself any better than you just did. Thank you for that.
All right. Well, Jason, I did forget to do one thing because as I introduce my very good friend, Jason, this is, ladies and gentlemen, Jason Hecker. There you go.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say, what's up? Why no applause? But okay.
You know, Jason, I did fail to read your contract writer, so I apologize for that.
Yeah.
But ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining the conversation. Jason, you are a busy guy, so I appreciate you carving out some time with me today. Let's start with how this all came to be. Blair High School, you were in the magnet program. We did share some classes together, but tell the folks how this friendship, this relationship, two guys who could not look more different and come from two different backgrounds. How did this come to be, Jason?
Well, so you and I have spoken about when exactly we met, and I don't know that we have pinpointed it, but I do know that right. We started high school at the same time. We were in the 9th grade together at Montgomery Blair. I believe we had a class together that year, and I believe that class was the choir. It might have been called just chorus, general
chamber
chorus.
Choir?
Well, see, but no, chamber choir you had to audition to, and you would. I don't think as a freshman we would have been eligible for it. So
right,
we
okay.
made it to chamber choir eventually and became closer friends there. Here's my first memory. It's a fuzzy memory. I just remember. So Montgomery Blair was a sort of an urban school for a young small white guy. And you know, big school, big footprint, crowded hallways. And as a 9th grader, you're just trying to fit in. You just want to kind of not get in anybody's way. And so, right. You know, you tend to be, you know, in my position anyway, you know a few people, you're quiet, you talk to the few people you know until you get your sea legs under you. And meanwhile, there's this guy, Kurtis Cross, same age as me, and he's striding through those hallways. He's like, get out of my way. Well, I don't think you literally said that, but you had a swagger about you, even at age, what was that, 14, 13?
13, I'm younger than everybody.
Right, I was 13 as well. So I just remember, I think you had a Letterman's jacket back then. You belonged there immediately. I was very lucky to have met you early on, and I believe we became friends in 9th grade, and then good friends in 10th, and then the good friendship continued long after that as well.
So here's the funny thing. You made me immediately think of a few things. If there was a Letterman's jacket, it was probably my sister's because she, did some sports and some cheerleading and all of that. Mm-hmm. Fascinating. I think you've mentioned that before. And I don't tell a bunch of people this, but if the podcast is successful, everyone now knows, I that might have been the personality, but inside there was a kid who just was not confident, who, if he walked with a big stick, it was for no good reason. It was maybe,
right.
It was kind of acting as if maybe, not necessarily who I was to my core or who I even felt confident being. But I think you still owe me some lunch money for protecting you.
Yeah, exactly. That's
I do cash app, Venmo, whatever works, So those are your memories, and I don't think my memory of how we came to be as friends would go back that far. When I think back to those times, I think of, drama. I think of the stage. I think of chamber choir. I think of the swagger that you had that came from a guy who seemed confident and who had talent. And I think, being good at something allows you to perhaps, carry that over into confidences in other areas. So I think that's where I would take it. I would take it. This guy, ladies and gentlemen, he grew a beard like way before anyone else. Jason, I shave like every 4 or 5 days. Like it doesn't grow that fast. Now I have to keep it short because the gray comes in, after a while, and we don't want that. But all right, so that's Blair High School. That's what we shared from the outset. But let's talk about what we shared that really meant. I mean, it meant as much as Blair, if not more. Your mother, Ivy. I always think about her in a positive light. I've seen her a lot more recently, and we'll get to that in a bit because we've done some virtual stuff together and some Zooms. But one of the things I remember about your mother, and she's still alive, so it's not like we're remembering, post life. Your mother encouraged me in business. For those who don't know me, who are listening, or getting to know me for the first time, I started a DJ business when I was 13. Summer, right after 8th grade, right before 9th grade. And your mother has been in business for a number of years, dabbling in this, dabbling in that. But she has given me a ton of great advice. One of the best things she's told me is when negotiating a contract, if you can live with the terms, you'd rather have part of something than all of nothing. You'd rather not walk away from it completely. If you can live with 90% of what you asked for and that's what you got, if you can live with it, go with it. But your mother encouraged me. I remember sitting at a dining room table that was rather large and having some good conversations with your mother. She knows how much I care about her. I try to take every opportunity I can when I talk to her by thanking her for being the woman that she is and what she meant to me in my life. But you invited me into your home. We didn't live close by. I mean, cat's out of the bag. I lived in DC, but went to Montgomery County, Maryland public schools. So it was a trek to go. That was right?
You're willing to say that now, right? I did not live in Montgomery County, but went to Montgomery County schools. I hope they don't come after you for that.
They can't. Are they going to take the diploma away now, you think?
I'd be careful about who you go around telling that to. Okay. I used to hang out at your place more than any of my friends, or than any of my other friends. I lived right on the edge of Burtonsville. It was a Silver Spring mailing address, but my friend Dave Weinstock lived in Burtonsville, and he was, 2 miles further away. But yeah, you used to come over to my house. I used to go over to your house. We used to have game nights in high school, which was not a thing that all that many people did. You used to host what was called the Jamboree, did you call it the Jamboree? Jamboree. Okay, the Jamboree. It was the game night Jamboree. We would I don't know how many different games you'd offer, but Pictionary and things like that, and people would hang out at your place on a Saturday night. We used to go to comedy clubs together a lot.
Cafe. That's where we saw Jake Johansson, right?
Yes, we did, and I became
still my favorite.
A lifelong fan of Jake Johansson, which is a very obscure reference right now. Nobody knows Jake Johansson, but
I don't. But he did do some during COVID. Him and his wife would go live a lot, and I would watch it. And they'd be inside it looked like a large walk-in closet, and there was just stuff everywhere. But I think he's probably most popular for his stand-up. Do you remember it was called This'll Take About an Hour?
Vaguely. I don't remember it well, but that was his special.
I'm sorry. We went to comedy clubs, and do you remember the Comedy Cafe? It was right above It was right above Archibald's, a striptease establishment.
I did not. I certainly didn't even know that at the time. Had I known that, I wouldn't have gone. But no, I was not aware of that. No, I think maybe that happened after I left. As a matter of fact,
sure.
Yeah, let's go with that. But yeah, we used to go to the comedy clubs. We'd have the game nights, and then of course you had the DJ business, and we would go to your gigs and hang out with junior high school kids.
Right, of course, because that's what you do when you're 17.
We did
I
that.
remember, I'm sure there was some carry out or pizza or, us with our lady friends and all of that stuff. I know Neil was there. Brigito was there. Maybe Doug Hatley, you, me, Shirley, the girls, all of that. And those were some fun nights. And funny how, 30 years later, we're having game nights as a family now. So, how would you describe your mother to our listeners and viewers?
All right. So my mother, as you said, she's had multiple businesses. And part of the reason that she has been what we would today call a freelance business person is because as a woman in the 1970s, she was the caretaker for the kids at home. She did not go out into the workforce and hire a nanny, or have other help around the house. She was the one that was raising my brother and me. So she got her master's degree while I was a young kid, while my brother was a young kid. She had these communications businesses. She got her certification in financial planning. So she has multiple, lots of levels of experience in multiple things. She was also a substitute teacher and an art teacher, like a crafty person. Yeah, I don't think you knew that. When I was a kid, that's what the kids in the neighborhood, like a small kid, the kids in the neighborhood would know her as the mom who would teach kids how to make stuff. And she would do that, I think, at the Y. She would do that in the neighborhood. She would do it at birthday parties and stuff like that. And there's a lot of crafty stuff around her house. And, so she's an artsy person. She is a business person. She's a great mom. She, and she, I think she's a product of her time as well. Whereas if she had grown up in my generation, she would have possibly gone to do certain things like what I've done, which is go out and, into the career world and leave the child rearing to to somebody that you could hire. But that was not what she was able to do. She was definitely very supportive. She's always been very supportive of me. And she was always a big fan of yours. And she always loved being helpful. She wants to help anybody she can help. So when you would, say, hey, Jason, can I ask your mom a question? She would pull up two chairs and say, yeah, what's your question? How can I help? And sometimes that can be met with less receptivity than you expressed. Like there are times I could foresee where my mom would offer an opinion, and lady, I don't really care about your opinion. But Kurtis is not the person who would ever think or say, lady, I don't care about your opinion. And so that's why I think you guys hit it off so well.
Well, we did. And your mom is a gem, and we still hit it off, and she's as funny as she's ever been. And I love our game nights. And again, we're going to get to that. Jason, we can't introduce you and talk about your life and how you and I kind of grew up together without talking about the New York Mets and what taking that train, the Amtrak train, meant to us, and getting on the number 7, the IRT line, right? Taking that into Flushing. Talk to me about your grandmother, Jason. These people need to know about grandma.
All right. So I went to NYU. I was in NYU from 1990 to 1994. And one thing that Kurtis and I have always had in common is a love for the New York Mets. That wasn't a great heyday for the Mets, but it was sort of in between periods. They had been to a World Series in '89. Obviously, they won it all in '86. Obviously, anybody that's listening to this knows they won in '86.
Everybody knows.
I don't even know why I would even say.
Jesse Roscoe, baby.
Yeah, you guys know. You guys know that they won it all in '86. So Kurtis would come up and visit in New York, and it was just natural that we would try to add a trip to Flushing Meadows and Shea Stadium. May it rest in peace. And my grandmother and grandfather, may they rest in peace, lived out in the near neighborhood in Queens as well. So we would go out and visit my grandparents. My grandmother would give us a meal of 4,000 or 5,000 calories, just a little nosh, just a little something between meals, frankly. Maybe just a lasagna and a kugel, and then we'd take in a game, and we have some great memories of watching the Mets together. And then, Kurtis, you might have taken the bus, or I don't know. How did you get back to DC after that weekend?
I know a time or two I would do, what was it? US Air had, what were those things on the weekends they had? They called them, I can't remember, but US Air would come out with their fares, and it'd be cheap for the weekend. You can fly into New York or whatever. I remember the train. I actually don't remember ever in my life taking a bus over a long distance.
I did. I occasionally took the bus back home. There were a couple of times where there was, I don't know if it was Trailways or some other bus company, but it wasn't the best way to travel. I don't highly recommend it, but it was.
You're not doing your help me with your grandmother's name.
Ruth, Grandma Ruth.
Grandma Ruth. So, guys, you have to understand, we haven't discussed the religion thing yet. I was, raised Catholic. I was baptized in blah, 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 Baptist church, Catholic church. Jason is Jewish. So we're talking about a Jewish grandmother in Queens, New York. And when you go to her, it was an apartment, Jason?
It was an apartment, yes.
You go to her apartment and say, well, Jason and I got to get out of here because my train leaves at 8, but we want to stop at McDonald's first. No. You're not going to McDonald's. Yeah. Not messing with Grandma Ruth. She just whips up a little something.
Yeah,
and like you said, it's a big meal. I know I've taken a bag or two on the train with me home of food from Grandma Ruth. So we talk about Grandma Ruth, but then let's also talk about, I will take a small moment to pat myself on the back. Your mother mentioned something about your grandfather who lived with you in Silver Spring, and something your grandfather remembered. Please share with the people what that is.
Yeah, and you should also tag on, because I'll give you the historic setting. My grandmother passed away in '93, and my grandfather was ill, and so my grandfather moved to Silver Spring, and he had his foot amputated. He had advanced diabetes, and so he was dealing with some heavy shit. He had just lost his wife of 40, 50 years.
Right.
And he had diabetes. He was sick. He was immobile. And it was just a sad time for him. I was away in college, so I didn't see him all that often during that period. You probably saw him more than I saw him, because I think you were visiting, you would hang out with my brother at the time. You'd visit my mom, you'd visit. And so the family was around, including my grandfather, Joe. And we were all talking recently. This is during the pandemic. And my mom said to you and me at the same time that her father, Joe, really enjoyed his time that he got to spend with you during that period. I did not know that either. It was news to you, and it was news to me. It was not surprising to me in the slightest, but you were closer to him in those moments than I was, because I was geographically further away. And I think what she said was that he really deeply appreciated the time that you spent with him. And I know that it was mutual.
It's crazy how, you do those things. And I was just a 20-year-old, 21-year-old, hanging out and talking and having conversation. I like to talk. I mean, I've got 4 or 5 different podcasts. I like to put my voice out there. And I don't know what, if there was any intent there other than to, talk and maybe learn something from someone. But I'm glad I was able to be that person. And I'm glad your mom has that memory. And now I have that memory. Let's talk about Heck Yeah. What does Jason? What does Jason Hecker do? I mean, we're going to get to family right behind this. Your family there in Chicago. But tell people where your creative mind goes and how you apply that and what's going on with you work-wise.
Sure. So I went to NYU. NYU has a really great film school. So I have a degree from NYU Film School. But what I was most interested in doing when I went to film school was being a writer. And I wanted to be a comedy writer. In New York at the time, that meant you could, if you were a successful comedy writer, it meant you were working at really only one of 2 places, David Letterman or SNL. That was it. You could move out to Hollywood and maybe try to get into the sitcom world, and there were only 5 channels. There were a couple others, but it was not the landscape that there is today. There was no YouTube. there was an opportunity to go into stand-up comedy, and that was sometimes a route to success. People like Ray Romano, people like Jerry Seinfeld were successful comics that then became successful other things. And so I did take a crack at being at stand-up comedy, and I did about 6 months of what you do in New York is you go to open mic nights and you develop your 5 minutes or your 10 minutes. And I used to do my 5 or 10 minutes a couple of nights a week for about 6 months. But what happened was I got frustrated with the lack of opportunity. Nobody answered my letter at SNL. Lorne Michaels never returned my call. David Letterman never returned my telegram. And I got a job at an event company. And so I became a professional writer at a firm that would put on shows for their clients. And their clients were oftentimes nonprofits and sometimes corporations. But these were cool nonprofits and corporations. I was working for the New York Yankees, and I became the show writer for the New York Yankees benefit dinner. And all the Yankees were there. All those famous athletes were there. I was writing scripts for CEOs, but not the sort of scripts that CEOs would give to their most important audiences. It was like the CEO of Colgate-Palmolive would have to talk about why he was the chairman of tonight's benefit to support Alzheimer's research. And somebody would have to tell him what tonight was all about, who raised the money, how much money was raised, why it's important to raise money at tonight's event. And it fell to a 22-year-old kid, and that was me. And I found myself on a career track where I was a CEO speechwriter, an event director, and I found myself in a place where I could do that for bigger and bigger audiences. And I moved to Chicago and joined a big firm called Carabiner Communications. They were purchased by a big firm called Jack Morton Productions. I moved to another one. And eventually, and not too long after, it was in 2002, I set up my own shingle, and it's called Heck Yeah, and I am a gun for hire. So in the world of corporate communications, event production, strategic communications, creative direction, there's lots of different things you could call it. Industrial theater is another one. You would hire me to produce your event, to direct your event, to come up with what's it going to look like, what are we going to say, and develop all the creative stuff that goes on around it. And it's been a nice career. That's what I've been doing now for 20 years. Yeah, I mean, 20 plus years.
So some of your clients are?
I work with clients. I work with Harley Davidson. I work with a lot of drug companies. I work with technology companies. All the West Coast technology companies out there all do product launches. There's big sectors. I work with food companies like Kellogg's and Sara Lee. All of these companies put on shows, and it's a type of theater that is something I'm I enjoy very much. It's not the type of theater I thought I was getting into when I went to film school and I went to art school, but it's something that I keep myself very busy. And in a typical non-pandemic year, I'm on the road all the time. I'm at big show sites, and I'm directing shows, and I'm working with my friends who are actors and lighting designers and producers and scenic developers and artists of all different types. And I get to work with clients that I love, and they call on me when they have new opportunities. So for the most part, the phone rings. I don't necessarily know what I'm going to be doing 6 months from now or 12 months from now, but over 20 years, the phone rings and there's always things to do.
So then so those who aren't necessarily following you word for word, what does it look like on my side of things? You're the creative director. These folks are doing product launches. They're putting on shows. What does that look like to the end user? So I'm in the audience. Right. I am who they're trying to reel in or who they're trying to impress or schmooze or whatever. What does it look like to me? So I would go to what sort of event would I say it is or what have you?
Okay, so I'll give you a historical example. And I worked with them for 15 years, Harley Davidson. Harley Davidson brings together, let's say, on average, about 5,000 dealers and dealer employees for their annual announcement show. And and this is something that Ford does and Tesla does and Apple and Microsoft. They all have announcement shows. But we'll talk about Harley Davidson
when the new iPhone comes out, that kind of thing.
Yes, exactly. Okay. And they when you're making these big announcements, you want to get into the press. You want to make sure that the public is hearing about it. You want to make sure that your sales force is knowledgeable and motivated and inspired by it, and your entire workforce and your leadership level. You want all these people to be very well educated and inspired to make it successful. Right. And so there is a communication plan that goes along with that, and you will hire an agency typically to develop that plan and execute that plan. So in the case of, let's call it Harley Davidson 100th anniversary, we've got big motorcycles that we're going to be launching. You're going to hire a creative director to develop that experience, and it involves the stage show. When there's 5,000 people in the audience, we're going to create big theatrical moments. We're going to make those new motorcycles appear, whether it's flying them in from the ceiling or riding them in from the back in a puff of smoke. You're going to write the speeches that get spoken around those announcement moments. You're going to create the videos. You're going to create some training. You're going to award the best salespeople. There's a whole host of elements to the experience, and it takes place over the course of a week.
And you part that out.
Yeah, and somebody has to look at the whole thing and say, what is the look and feel? What is the theme? What is the color scheme? What do we want the staging? How is the staging going to connect to, from the big room to the little room? How are we going to make sure that the video that plays at the beginning feels like it's connected to the video that plays at the end? How are we going to make sure that the thing that the CEO says is connected to the thing that the training manager says? And so that's the creative director's job. And there's an army of 100 people that are involved in little pieces of this. But my job is to look at the look and feel of the experience and make sure that we're creating a plan and then executing the plan. And I might write the script for some of those things, and in others I will direct the people who are writing the script or executing the movie. Or we're going to hire dancers for this, or we're going to have a laser light show, but I've got to make sure that it all fits together. And that's what a creative director does. Yeah.
Excellent. So while we're talking about heck yeah, that is not what makes you who you are. Obviously Ivy and Larry make you who you are, your upbringing, your schooling, and all of that. Let's get into what really, really matters. Your brother, Aaron. Let's talk about Aaron.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you've known Aaron for a long, long time. He is 3.5 years younger than me. He lives in Georgia right now with his wife of 15 years, I want to say. He's got 4 kids, and they have a wonderful life. They live on a big piece of land, and we don't get to see them very often, but we see them on Zoom. And other social media and other media platforms like that. And my kid, who's 13, gets along great with his kids, who are a range of ages, younger and older. My brother and I have not lived in the same area in a long time, like really since I moved out of the house in Maryland in 1990. But we have a good distant relationship. We see each other from a distance.
All right. So now we get to Alyssa and Ian.
Yeah.
You and Alyssa were married when? I can't recall.
We were married in 1998. So coming up on 23 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, right.
And I remember Alyssa at the festival she hates, the San Gennaro Festival. We did that together, right?
Yep. In New York.
A bunch of things in New York together. That was a great time, but she didn't. She remembers being in there, and Alyssa's a small person. She's not a tall or large lady, so she's getting pushed around with the crowd. I'm a bigger dude, so it didn't bother me so much. But there's Alyssa, there's Ian, who you mentioned, your 13-year-old, and we now do. Last time I saw Ian in person would have been, goodness, Chelsea was 2 or 3, maybe, right?
I wasn't even that old. I want to say that they were both around. They were both in the neighborhood of 12 months. They were toddling.
Because he's already 13. She turns 13 in June. So I think he's 6 months ahead of her.
Yeah.
So Yeah, actually, it was around our second anniversary, and she was born June of 2008, and our second anniversary would have been July of 2009. So she'd have been just over a year old, maybe.
Yeah, that
so
sounds about right.
Where it was. And then now I see him. I've seen him 10 times more on Zoom than I've ever seen him in person. We've had virtual game nights. His bar mitzvah was virtually. And I'll tell you, we really appreciate those game nights. But let's talk about 2020.
Yep.
The aforementioned game nights, Ian's bar mitzvah, came about because of this pandemic. We spoke early on when COVID emerged, and it was sort of, becoming clear that the world and how we move and shake, all of that was going to change. I think we both prepared for a long-term change. How did that affect your work and the Hecker footprint?
Yeah. So taking a step even further back, we reached out to you to be the DJ at his bar mitzvah. Right, and that would have been, I'm going to say 18 months out from the party, which was, long time out. We had that date. We had the venue. Now we had the DJ. We had Kurtis all picked out, and we were all really excited. I'm speaking for you now, but I'm speaking for myself as well. We were all really excited to have this party. And then COVID comes along, and COVID came along about 8 months out from the party. And then we started to realize, oh shit, this isn't going to happen. It's certainly not going to happen the way that we had anticipated it. And as we got closer, we realized, okay, we can't do the party in person. We can't have a dance floor. We can't all be in the room together. We switched it over to a virtual bar mitzvah, and it became a Zoom broadcast. And speaking only about the bar mitzvah, it was a really lovely event. I think everybody that experienced it, you were one of the attendees. We broadcast from our home, so we did not go to a synagogue, but there was a rabbi and a cantor in other locations, and we were all part of the same experience. Ian did a wonderful job. We all really felt like there was the warm embrace of family, and it was a good example of how you make not just lemonades out of lemons. I believe that's how it goes. You make lemonade out of lemons, right? Right. But it was also, I think, something, I guess actually lemonade is better than lemons. It was better than, in some ways, it was better than it would have been otherwise. Obviously,
like a fruitcake. It was like a fruitcake.
Thank you, like a fruitcake. I don't know what the analogy is. Perhaps I should dispense with analogies altogether. I think my point is that there were things that the age of COVID has wrought, which are better than they would have been without COVID. It's not to say that the age of COVID doesn't suck. The age of COVID sucks. It has been an awful time. But when I look back on it, there are some things that have emerged from it that are better than, that I'm grateful for. And game nights with you guys is an example of something we just wouldn't have done without COVID. And that's cool. And there are benefits, and I can enumerate others as well. Just spending more time with my family. I have not been on the road as I normally would be for work, and there's benefit to being home. And we have dinner together. Not right now because I'm recording a podcast, but otherwise I'm having dinner with my family.
This is highly important stuff. It's like class 5, like really high level.
Yeah, right. Otherwise, I'd be having dinner with my family right now.
I have to rewind. If anyone in the free world who attended your son's bar mitzvah even thinks about saying that they may have seen tears come out of my eyes, call them a liar right away.
Yeah, no, somebody was chopping onions in your house. I can't see any other explanation for that.
Right. No, Jason, I just need you to know again, in front of our podcast audience, I could not have been happier to be there in those moments and to see your family celebrate, to see Ian try to rush through things, because why do I have to do this? Probably is part of what he was thinking. Right. But to see you and Alyssa have raised this young man on what is the most important day of his young life thus far. His birthday, the day he was born, his mitzvah day, and hopefully the day he becomes married, if he chooses to, and becomes a father. Those would be the moments, Yeah. So he's reached 2 of those now, and we were happy to be a part of it. We cannot gloss over the game night thing. it has, we have developed a few relationships, me, Paula, and the kids, with folks. The relationship we've developed with you is so very important because, as you said, we would not have, you and I would talk, once a month, once every few months, or, I'd text you and say, let's get on a call sometime. You would do the same. But, for a while there, and we haven't had a game night in a while, things have really picked up over here on the virtual side of podcasts and the DJ business. But I mean, we're talking sometimes once a week, but every couple of weeks, we're sitting down for 3 hours, me, you, your family, my family, your mom, your dad. And I feel like Aaron was a part of one of them, but, we would do this thing and we'd be able to reminisce and talk and have a bunch of laughs. And, my wife is texting your wife and we're texting articles to each other. And that friendship, I mean, you and I had a friendship, and of course, Paula and Alyssa know each other, but I mean, they text each other freely. And I think that's great. That is what I would say I do appreciate about the pandemic, developing relationships or stronger relationships. I've had a couple of new ones, but developing the deeper relationships. But anyway, so how has this affected your work? Now, how does that change?
Yeah. So it's an interesting answer. I'm in the event industry as much as any industry. And so you can imagine that the event industry was sideswiped. It was, I mean, the idea that people cannot get together inside of four walls, they can't get on airplanes, convention centers and restaurants and hotel ballrooms, all these places are kind of shuttered. There's like cobwebs on them. It seemed when COVID first landed that my livelihood was going to be destroyed. And so, and I was very busy prior to that, and I was looking out at a very busy calendar I was very busy in January, very busy in March, very busy let's say in February and March, and then the faucet turned off. Like everything canceled, and there was nothing, and there was no activity. And there was a lot of fear in my industry in particular that, this could last forever or for a very, very long time. And what in fact happened was that there was about 6 weeks where there was really nothing going on. And speaking only for myself, the faucet came back on, and the faucet came back on kind of briskly and kind of overwhelmingly by midsummer. And since midsummer, I have been slammed with work because the event industry and what I've been able to do in the event industry has switched over to virtual events, digital events. So the corporations and the trade associations are bringing their audiences together on screen instead of in ballrooms. And they still need people to conceive of the experience, to decide what is the look and feel, what does it look like, what are we going to say. There's still storytelling, there's still media development, there's still video capture and video production. And so all of those things have become my stock and trade. And in fact, I have done more of that. I'm able to do more of that than I could ever do in the old world, because I can stack up these productions and work on them at the same time. I can be working on 7 or 8 of these things at the same time. I'm not taking myself out of the matrix to get on an airplane, to go to a hotel, to be inside a ballroom. I'm always at my desk. I can get on a conference call and talk about Project A at 8 o'clock and then switch over to Project B at 9 o'clock and continue that throughout the day, every day, into the evening, into the weekends. It is, there's more that I can squeeze into my life. Is that really what I want to be doing? That's another question. And, I don't know that this faucet will remain on. I don't know that I'll be drinking from the fire hose forever, but for 6 months now, that's what it's been like. And I expect that I will go back to something more like the regular life at some point, but I don't know when, I don't know how.
I'm not Nostradamus on this one, but I think that in my business is affected as well. We're in the events industry. We produce events, not to your scale by far, but more so corporate events where we're doing sound and lighting and that sort of thing, and DJ services and weddings, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But I'm not Nostradamus when I say I think a percentage of this industry is not going to mind staying virtual. I think there's going to be, or I think there's going to be an avenue and a path in a career lane to still produce some things virtually. I don't know that that's going to go away, but we'll certainly find that out, hopefully relatively soon. But you're prepared on either side of that fence to be successful.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
No, yeah, I am. I agree with you. I think your industry, like mine, will talk about something called hybrid events, because when you can bring people back inside the four walls, there will definitely be people who will rush to go back inside those four walls. And then there will be the other people who, for whatever reason, will say, but if I can do it this other way, like I learned in 2020, I think I'll do that too. Like there are people that want to be on the dance floor dancing, but if I can see the dance floor and stay home, and you'll get more people involved that way. The same 500 people that would have been on the dance floor before could go to the dance floor, but you could get 5,000 people to watch that can't get on a plane from Brazil. And I think that'll, a variation on that formula will happen in my industry and your industry and many other industries.
Smarten up, open the market up, right?
Right.
We might have 2 lanes we can travel on this one.
Right.
So we talk pandemic. We cannot discuss 2020 without bringing to this table social justice and politics.
Yeah.
Let's reset the scene. Jason is a Montgomery County kid, went to the magnet program at Blair High School. Blair High School was not his home high school. The magnet program is something you had to test into, and that magnet program provides a more stringent curriculum and college prep than your regular public school program. I was in the regular public school program. There were certainly, I would say, maybe 75% of your classes were magnet based, but there were some other classes, and that's where you and I would have connected, at Blair High School, a huge high school. So you and I are from two different worlds. I'm in DC. My parents split up when I was in 4th grade. We were on public assistance when my mom was on her own and that sort of thing. So we're talking about guys from two different worlds. We're talking about, me being introduced to the Jewish culture, not from you first, but I knew of the Jewish culture from a few friends. David Herman helped me start the business, blah, blah, blah. But then, I got immersed more into the Jewish culture sitting at your dining room table, doing Passover, doing Yom Kippur, doing Rosh Hashanah, and those sorts of things. So you and I have different experiences. I think you and I have not mentioned this to you, but I think you understand the angle of white privilege and where it comes from, how it exists. You understand it from a unique standpoint in this conversation, because not only are you a white male, or white, but you're a male. And those are two, you're the most hated guy in America sometimes, right?
Right. The most privileged, right? Yeah, definitely. Right. There's no question about it. Yeah.
So now what kind of conversations did you have in your home at your dining room table, over the past year, be it pandemic, be it social justice, be it Black Lives Matter, be it politics? Because while I am not a hugely political kind of person, I know that, as I said in a different podcast, what I saw on January 6th with the Capitol insurrection was a fear that white supremacy would go away and the desire for hundreds, if not thousands, to fight to keep white supremacy alive. Tell me what kind of conversations you have a 13-year-old, you have a wife who's a social worker. What did that bring into your home? What were those conversations like?
Well, let me say, first of all, I agree with everything you just said and the way you characterized it. And for those who have not, should go listen to Kurt's podcast from the days after January 6th, because I think you captured exactly how I feel, and it's a conversation that needs to be had by more people. It's tough to have these conversations with a 13-year-old because you and I know that 13-year-olds have very thick skulls. It's hard to permeate that. And I know it from experience. I think you'd probably agree that, when I was 13, you just don't understand very much, and there's not very much that you can be told. It's hard to see outside your very narrow worldview. I think it's probably true of most people, but white people have no idea the privilege that we have, and the recent events have just made it so blindingly obvious and angering. Yeah, the way you characterize what happened on January 6th, I think is exactly right. It was simmering, and then it just exploded out into the open. I think you could characterize the Trump phenomenon as it was. He is a manifestation of that mindset that whether you want to call it white supremacy, and I do. Some people will be triggered, and to say that if you voted for Trump, you are supporting white supremacy. I understand why that could anger some people, and you know what? I've angered you, and for that, I say, that's unfortunate. But there is no doubt that what animates that section of the population is a fear of losing feeling like they're losing their country. That's how they say it. I feel like I'm losing my country. We can't let this happen to our country. But that's how you were describing President Obama. What exactly about the Obama years did you feel like you were losing your country, if not in the area of race, in the area of immigrants who who are enjoying the American experience? That is the definition of white supremacy. If you don't like the term, that's unfortunate, but that is it. And
what country are we losing when we're talking about a country that was built? Like, how far do I have to go back to find someone in your family, Jason, who wasn't born here?
In my case, you'd go back to turn of the century, 1900 or so, and they came from Eastern Europe. So we're talking about Lithuania and Poland and areas that are now Russia. And they dealt with issues that all immigrants have dealt with. But I think a difference is that their children and their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren are white. And if you have white skin, you have an undeniable benefit in this country. Some of the benefits that I enjoy are through no fault, nothing that I've done, and some of them are because my parents have done great things and their parents did great things, and I worked hard and they worked hard. But you can't chalk up everything to that. And if you cling to the belief that the only difference between those who succeed and those who don't is those who work hard and those who don't, it's delusional. And it's just not something I believe.
You're absolutely correct. And so I'm here in the DC area, of course, and in this very studio where I sit, I was working, and on January 6th, we turned on CNN, and at first I think it was some off channel, not even CNN or MSNBC, who had the news first. So I was watching that at first, and I'm literally watching the news report as a woman is on the phone talking back to her studio, and you hear people trying to bang into the Capitol building. And this woman is up on a terrace, and they're at the doors underneath her, and she's describing it. So it's like she has box seats at the theater or something, and there's a level of box seats underneath you or what have you. And, she's hearing them try to come in, and this is all developing live. This is not a movie. You're not watching it in repeat. And that's what, I was watching. And the kids were home at that time for some reason. I think they were still on winter break or what have you. And so, Adam, you're going to watch this with me, Right. And so we went through that. And, I don't want this conversation to be solely about that, because there's a couple of other things I want to talk about. But, it was, what did they feel like they were losing? And now we're going through the second round of the impeachment trial, and you're seeing some video you haven't seen before. And it is shocking. I assume you've seen some of it where we're talking about people who are breaking down gates and doors. We're saying our president sent us here and blah, blah, blah. And, one thing that I come back to as well is I don't think, how do I say it? I don't think people who voted for him in large part, I think there's a section of people who did not vote for him despite what his rhetoric was. I think they voted for him because of that rhetoric, not despite that rhetoric. I think there was a cowardly platform that many of those who support him believed in, and now they had a leader who believed in it just like them and who wasn't afraid to say it. So it made it in vogue to feel that way now, because you didn't have to hide and say it. Because the guy who leads our country, although he didn't say all of it, he's implying almost all of it. And I think that's where we were with that. And it's sickening. It's sickening to me that you and I are 1,000 miles away from each other and have a great friendship. And we grew up in a school that, for better and for worse, didn't allow me to see that you were Jewish Jason. That's not who you were. You were a cool guy who could grow a beard, and we sang you and I and Dave Gaspin and a couple of other guys tried to come up with a doo-wop group or something and sing some Billy Joel together, right? That's what Blair did for us. But we're living in a time right now that I hope it gets better. I certainly hope it gets better, and I think it. I still believe that in the good of most people. I don't think that most people want what we saw on January 6th.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I think that history has shown, I think it was Martin Luther King who talks about history bending towards justice. And I think that I like to think that that's true. And also that there's a pendulum that shifts. And so, we have seen presidents that I have felt strongly negative towards, and then we swing towards a president that I feel positive towards, and negative and positive. And you hope that, I feel pretty positive about the one we've got now, and that we will find this as a period of arcing towards justice. This is something that kind of bridges the last three questions that you have raised. How do we make the world better? In my industry, I look around my industry, which is a very niche industry. It's a very narrow. If you're Harley Davidson and you're going to launch some motorcycles, who are you going to call to be the director of that show? You're probably going to call one of four people. And it's I'm oversimplifying, but it's a very narrow industry. And then you compare that to, like, if you are the Philadelphia Eagles, who are you going to hire to be your head coach? You're probably going to go to one of four people. Part of the problem with our society is that there is a deep divide between those who are very successful and those who are very unsuccessful. And we're finding that there's a lot of white people on the one half and a lot of dark-skinned people on the other half. And so in my industry, one thing that I am very interested in helping with is helping to bridge that divide. And you just look around, in the meetings that I attend, the people in my industry, they're all people with thinning hair and white skin. And we need to get people with darker skin. And so I want to bring people up. I want to find people that would not know about my industry into my industry. And I want these to be people of color. And I want to be a mentor, and I want to be somebody who can bring the next generation on. Because the Rooney Rule in football is half of an idea, but we've seen where it falls apart. And I think you got to start by building up the farm system. And that's something that I can help.
I'm going to have a conversation on my podcast in the coming weeks about the Rooney Rule with an author who has written extensively and spent a lot of time in that. I don't want to give too much up of that. But I think, when you look at something like that, not in your industry, but with the Rooney Rule, you look at, so in college and pro football, you don't have enough folks of color who are in positions that, who are in the sexy positions. When it comes to administration, it comes to coaching staff and all of that. And I heard something recently where, because the athletic directors are mostly white, because the donors and the alumni are mostly white, because, those people who are in the positions of power, those alum who give millions of dollars, is there an unwritten rule that I want to see someone who looks like me in that position if I'm going to give this money? Now, it's okay if the kid running the football doesn't look like me, because we need touchdowns, because we need to get to that next bowl game. Every year I produce a photo album of our year with the family. On the front of that cover, in the back of that cover, typically, I don't know if I shared this with you. Did I share this with you?
No.
on the front and back of those album covers each year is something that exemplifies that year. For the year of 2020, it was a young man in very good shape that said, "I wish America loved me like they loved me when I was a scholarship athlete." You know?
Right.
And the year before, it was when the Nationals won the World Series, and it was one of the pitchers who refused to go to the White House because he said, at the end of the day, I want to be there with my friends, but I can't go there when a man like that he has a special needs sibling.
Yeah.
And the way 45 made fun of a special needs reporter, he said, I just can't do it. And, right. The first year I made it was with Kaepernick. Sometimes you have to, if you believe in something, it means giving up everything. So I try to have a theme there. But I think that's what we're talking about. We're talking about people who are in fear of losing what they feel to be their advantage if people that don't look like them become empowered. Jason, why do you want to change that in your industry? Why? Well, if for someone like you, you're making good money, you're successful in your industry, the phone keeps ringing, the email keeps dinging, why do you want to change your trajectory? Or not necessarily that, why do you want to, you're on a path, why do you want to step to the left or right? I'm glad you do, but right. Why now? Why this time? You could, if you chose to, you could be selfish and say, it's working for me, I've got my blinders on, I'm just going for that next paycheck. Why do you want to throw caution to the wind?
Well, first of all, you're giving me way too much credit because by doing this, I'm not taking food off of my own table. I'm at a level of success. I'm like Andy Reid, who hey, I'm already a head coach. So Andy Reid is a guy, or actually a better example is the guy from Tampa Bay.
Whoa! Andy Reid lost the Super Bowl. You got to stick with him.
All right, no, but I mean the idea of hey, I have a chance to create my coaching tree now. My legacy is, who are the people that I taught this business to, who will continue on and, learn the business and become the head coach, 20 years from now when I'm not interested in doing it anymore. So it's not like I'm stepping down from my, exalted position. It's, I don't deserve credit for deciding this is how I want to, this is how I want to exert my energy. It would be different if I were saying, I don't deserve this job. Give it to this person. But I'm not being that selfless. What I'm saying though is that there is an opportunity to make my industry better, and that's something that I think exists in other industries as well. You got to build up the farm system. I'll tell you how I got my job. I left this out of the story. And it's actually a good way because we left him out of the family tree too. My dad, I got a great dad too, Kurtis. Why didn't you mention my great dad? You just only mentioned my great mom. So Larry Hecker.
Larry, yes. Yeah. He is the man. I'll tell you one thing. He knows a little bit about everything. I love that guy too.
All right. Okay. So in keeping with that theme, I was at a film school. I was doing a job that paid a little, but I didn't know how to get to the next step. And I'm asking everybody I know, how can I get where the money is in this business? Right. And my dad was one of the people I asked, and he happens to know the guy who is the buyer at Midas, the guy at Midas who puts on these shows for Midas dealers. And so he introduced me to the guy at Midas, and I talked to the guy at Midas, and the guy at Midas puts me in touch with the guy in Chicago who happens to have an opening, and that's how I get the job. Now, my dad's an old white guy. His friend at Midas is an old white guy. His friend at the agency is an old white guy. It's an old white guy's network, and I was 22 or 26 at the time, and that's how I got my job. Now, the 26-year-old black guy who has the same ability as me is, even if he asks his dad, hey, who do you know, or asks around, he doesn't have the same network into the old white guy society. And it's not like anybody was overtly racist in how this happened. They were looking for a job to fill a job. I have the skills, and I got the job. Now I've got more skills 2 years later, and when the next job comes along, I'm great for it. But if you were filling up the farm system, if you had a bench where you were actively reaching out into urban junior colleges, if you are mentoring people actively and teaching them skills, now you've got people that don't look like me, whose dad is not my dad, whose friend is not my dad's friend. And our industry looks different. And I think our industry is stronger as a result. And I feel like that's a model that can be applied elsewhere too. Whether it's the NFL or, fill in the blank, where there is not equal representation across the landscape, it's because nobody is actively trying to build up from the roots. And I think we just got to build up the grassroots.
And did you see, or do you know what Tampa Bay's coaching staff looks like?
It was Arians, right? Is it Bruce Arians? Yeah, Bruce Arians is a guy who actively, I believe, said, "Hey, I'm building my coaching tree. I'm an old guy. I'm not going to be coaching forever. But if I put Byron Leftwich in that position, and help me out here, I'm not an NBA guy. I'm not an NFL guy. All right.
That coaching tree looks like women and people of color and people who don't look like him.
Exactly. And I think that is at least as good I think that's a better model than the Rooney Rule. The Rooney Rule, I'm not poo-pooing the Rooney Rule, but we've seen the shortcomings of that. There's no way to legislate a solution that way. And that's what it is. It's legislation. So get people who care about this and start filling up the ranks beneath them, and then there will be a natural, elevation of those people.
Well, we have a couple things here. We have a first. I did not know that I would produce this or any podcast and hear the words poo-poo. So
okay, all right.
You win there.
That's one.
Win there. Uh-huh. All right, Jason. We're gonna have to go to part 2 at some point.
All right,
we're gonna have to do that. This has been excellent. I have a couple of bullet points here that I'm going to save for another time. I wanted to get a little bit more into social justice. I think you and I are on the same page there. I will not oversimplify it, but we've got to have national reform on how our communities are policed. And I think it needs to be with community policing. I think that when you have, police officers, men and women who don't know the town, who don't know the streets, who don't know the road, I think they police a little bit differently with a bit more of an itchy trigger finger. I think when we, have folks who police our communities, who are from the communities, I think it makes for a much better, police to constituent to resident relationship. I will not say all cops are bad. All cops are not bad. All creative types like you aren't bad, but there are some, we don't want you to be looped in with the guys who are on the wrong side of it. And I don't want all cops to be looped in, with cops who are on the wrong side of it. But we have a much broader conversation to have at some point. And I will write that script and I'll invite you back.
Good.
But your time is important to me. Anything you want to, it doesn't sound like you need to tell the people much about Heck Yeah, because it sounds like Heck Yeah is doing what it does, So what's next?
So you can find me at heckyeah.com. It's HECK-YEAH.com, or find me on LinkedIn. Anybody who knows me or would like to know me, but we haven't spoken, reach out to me. I'd love to speak to you. And I am a big supporter of Kurtis Cross and his global domination plans. We're gonna look back on this as just the beginning of of his podcast empire.
Wait a minute, you don't want royalties later, do you?
I will have that conversation between part 1 and part 2. I mean, if you want me back, we're gonna have to talk some kind of royalty situation.
The first one for free, right?
Yeah, the first one's free.
Well, then we can do part 2 through 8 right now.
we could, but you'll have to speak to my certified financial planner. That's Ivy Hecker.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't have any big plans to discuss, but this has been a blast. This is definitely fun, and I wish I had a strong closing statement, but
well, my closing statement for you is join me backstage in a minute, or I'll put you backstage in a minute. We'll debrief this really quickly, but ladies and gentlemen, that is Jason Hecker. This is a very important episode to me. Jason, thank you for the friendship, for your family you shared with me, for Alyssa, who has become a gem. She is just a gem with her emails and her texts and all of that. And you know what? We didn't talk about this. Every now and then you like some of my tweets. I appreciate that.
Oh, yeah.
Not all the time, but every now and then. But ladies and gentlemen, I want to put him backstage and wrap up with you. How about a round of applause for Mr. Jason Hecker?
Hey, one more thing. Alex Bustamante. Go, Alex. I should have mentioned you earlier, but shout out to Alex Bustamante. All right. Thank you, Kurtis. Later.
I'll see you in a minute, Jason. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for joining me for Crosstalk Conversations with Kurtis. Definitely appreciate the time that Jason Hecker gave me today. We're going to come back in future weeks. We've got a bunch of great content. I've got a ton of guests lined up. Don't forget, if you know of a guest who needs to get in contact with me, who you believe should be on the show, I want to hear about it. Write to kurtisandpaula@gmail.com. That's where you'll find us. You can also find me on social media, Instagram and Twitter at Kurtis Talks. That's Kurtis with a K. Listen on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and wherever podcasts are found. Go to kurtistalks.com. That's where you'll find me. I'll see you soon, guys.
Crosstalk Conversations with Kurtis can be heard on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Music, and just about anywhere podcasts can be found.
You know, there are few relationships more solid than the bond between a man and his barber. For years, I've gotten my cut with Gene the Barber. Gene has been cutting my hair for more than 20 years. Call him directly at 240-687-7253 and make an appointment. Gene the Barber, 240-687-7253.
A Squared Home and Office Solutions is the go-to source for home or office network and audiovisual solutions. We can help with smart home integration, wireless networking, media rooms, security systems, and more. We will link technology to your lifestyle seamlessly. Visit homeandofficesolutions.com for more info.